Hi. Hi. Do you know how I mean, there is no left. Do you know if I want to open? I would like to do,
Different tabs.
yeah, different types. That's what I want to do.
The route.
Yeah. So, do you know how to do that?
Hit the right click.
Yeah, but how do you? I mean, I would like to open each slide into another tab, but I don't want to waste my time on that. Oh, you open manually all the slides. You don't have the right click and yeah, that's
For example,
yeah. Okay, that's the trick.
that's the trick. And then you just have to like switch tabs.
Yeah. That I think I can do. Switch the tab.
I need to go take the back.
Okay. So what time is it? Okay, go. Good evening, everyone. I think if you're not expecting to attend the ACE session, then you're in the wrong room. I'm wondering if people on Meeteco can hear me. So please note that there is a not well that applies to the meeting. I think you know that not well very well. Otherwise, just read it very quickly. So starting the agenda, I'm going to ask for who can play the role as a minute taker. Oh, it sounds the mic doesn't work. Who could be the minute taker? No minute taker. Who could be the Jabber scribe? Who volunteers for? Do we have a volunteer for minute taker and Jabber scribe? Okay, so thank you, Francesca. Jabber scribe. So we need a minute taker. No volunteers. Oh, okay.
I'm not confident in my ability of English. If somebody can help me, that's very helpful.
Okay, so is there anyone willing to help? Volunteering to help?
how many do you have right now?
So no one is willing to help for the minute taker? That would be appreciated. We're looking for a minute taker. Okay, so let's start this way. Is the latest person agreeing to take the? Are you agreeing to help the minute taker? Okay. A jabber. So we would really appreciate a minute taker too. Okay, right. Okay, so that's perfect. Thank you. So we have jabber, minute taker. Here is the blue sheets. So please sign the blue sheets. And I'm going to provide some time for Ben to provide any comment. Oh, I'm going to give the... So the current drafts we have are the key group com, the group com OS core, and the MQTT TLS profile. I suggest we start with the group com. Yeah, you can. Or do you want to say something, Francesca?
Am I supposed to give a comment first?
As you wish. Okay, so fine. Francesca? I just want to confirm with the remote participant if they do hear me or hear Francesca.
Hello. Hi. Can you switch to my slides?
Okay. Oh, yeah. That's I'm gonna try not to mess up with group com.
No. I'll tell you when it is. Nope. Nope. Nope.
No. Yeah.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you. So this is an update to the ACE key group com document. A quick recap. This document specifies how to get keys and authorizations to group members to join a group communication scenario. This is the general one, and then the application profiles define exactly what group communication protocol and security protocol are used. And so this is structured with the first phase that is defined in ACE with authorization request, response, and token post. And then there is additional steps, which are the joining request response, group rekeying, and secure group communication that are also defined here. So version 3 is being updated following reviews of version 2. So thank you very much, Ludwig and Daniel, for providing those reviews. These were addressed in the mailing list, and we agreed mostly with the comments we had, and we have incorporated them. Please get back to us if you're not satisfied with our answer. We haven't heard anything yet, so we assume that everything is fine. Also, at the, IETF 105, there was some discussion and offline chat brought mostly from Karsten and Jim that suggested that we restify our interface. So instead of relying on type of request and response, that we create a RESTful interface at the key distribution center. And this is the major difference in this document. Also, we did what I think are major improvement on Appendix A, which specify requirements of the application profiles that have to build on this document. We also got a new review from Jim of version 3. We already discussed this review with Jim offline, and we agreed on a way forward. There's no major problems with it. And also yesterday, we got a review from Peter, so thank you very much. We haven't had time to look at this review comments, but we quickly scanned through. I don't see any major issue with it. I don't know if Peter is online, but if he is and he thinks that anything is worth discussing now, please come and comment it so we can do that. But yeah, so about the major update, restification. So now we define an interface at the key distribution center of different resources. So we have a number of resources under this ACE group / GID. GID is the group identifier, and we assume that each key distribution center maintains one resource per security group. And this resource supports get and post method. Get would get the group key material. Post would allow a node to post its own public key to the key distribution center, and the response will return the group key material and all the public keys of the nodes. Other resources are pub key, that is under the group ID, that will allow a node to get all the public keys of the nodes in the group or request a certain number of public keys, thanks to the nodes identifiers. Then we have policies, getting the group policies. How these are defined is application profile dependent. Then there is something called context number or CTX num that allows to get a version of group key material. This number is incremented by 1 every time the group is rekeyed. And then there is the node resource or endpoint that supports get and post methods. A member would do a get to this resource to get individual key material to protect outgoing messages, or it would do a post to request to leave the group. And I see Karsten has a comment.
Yeah, Carsten Bormann. There are 3 pairs of get and post there. And I think the first and the third are idiomatic.
I can barely hear you. Could you speak a bit?
Wow.
Sorry.
Okay, there are 3 pairs of get and post there. And I think the first and the third are idiomatic. The second really is one of those cases where we designed fetch for.
Yeah, and so we got this comment from Jim as well. And actually, let's go to that slide. Did I have it? Yeah, that's the fourth point. Using post to retrieve public key of node seems like the wrong method. Jim suggested fetch. We didn't go with fetch because that is optional, like in co-op. It's not mandatory to have. Like you can have.
It's not mandatory to have post either. They have
not?
exactly the same status.
Okay, I thought that would, if you implement co-op according to specification, you have to have post. Is that not the case?
Co-op just defines the number of methods, and which of these you actually provide as a server. That's up to you.
Okay. Is Klaus
So
in the room?
Put is who in the room?
Klaus.
Klaus.
Yeah, I just assumed that like a base co-op implementation would not necessarily have fetch because it came later and it's not as
Yes.
So that's why
But there is little point to add something to CoAP and then continue using the workarounds that were necessary 5 years ago. So I think we should just assume it's
Okay.
there. And I mean, it's not the amount of code you have to write for supporting this is kind of very small.
Okay. So okay, we will add that. Thank you for that. Yeah, so this is what we did so far. And then we got, we defined the operations that by specifying what endpoint to contact. So we said for doing a joining of a group, you do this request. For doing retrieval of updated key material or new key material or public keys or group policies or in key material version, etc. We define what method on which resource. So we have planned the update of version 4 following Jim's review. So the main difference is that instead of having this node path, we will now have one node resource per member of the node, per member of the group. So before we had just the node path that will be the same for all the members, and now we're gonna have a different one for each member. Instead of using get to get the KDC to produce and return the individual key material, James suggested we use put, and we use get instead to get the group key material plus the individual key material. That would allow also to observe that resource. And finally, instead of post to leave the group, Jim suggested the delete. So we thought these were all very good ideas, and unless objections, we'll go ahead and do this change.
Just to have a sense of the room, is there anyone disagreeing with us or having any comment with that? Do people have a clear opinion, or people are fine either way?
I guess that we will do the update and see if it's going to be easier to understand once the update is done. And then following that, we will have to do some update to the operations. Yeah, this is all covered by the previous slide as well. So there is also some minor or other comments following Jim's review. So the first one was, if the client contacts the KDC endpoints not on the secure channel, it gets an error for one unauthorized. And Jim was suggesting that we include the AS creation hints, so the response to the token post, in the errors payload. We thought that's a good idea. So second point is, because of the change of the resource from node to the node name, every node will need this node name. Even if this node is just monitoring, it's not going to send any message. So it does not need an identifier for the group, but it does need some type of identifier for, or name for this. Another comment was about sending the URI of certificate instead of the URI of key repository. We're fine with that. And then finally, the using fetch instead of post. So we'll go ahead and do that. And also we got the comments from Peter that we will add, but we didn't see anything major yet. So yeah, that's it, unless there are comments or questions from the Jabber maybe.
Any remote participant has any questions, comments? Okay. So I'd like to understand, if there are any comments or opinion on how to move the draft forward, any comments so that we can move faster?
We basically just need to do this update now,
Yeah.
so this will not.
But there is no. I would like to avoid that comments comes. Once. So it's time to raise your opinion if you have any.
Because more generally for implementers, it's quite useful to know whether a draft currently is quicksand,
It's
or
what?
quicksand,
Okay.
or whether it's ready to implement. So I think at some point we should simply say, okay, we are done shifting things around. Please go ahead, implement it. And then we will get more feedback and
Yeah.
do more changes. But
So I think personally that this draft has improved a lot with this update, and it's not ready to implement because we want to do this next update first. And once we have processed these comments for this update and Peter's comments, and if we don't get any major objection, I think that will be it, and possibly before next IETF.
so I would propose that we actually, in the front matter of the draft, at some point say, hey, this is an implementation draft.
Sure.
So we ask people to implement it because we are done making changes on our own, and we now would like to make only changes that are based on feedback from implementers.
Yeah.
So I think
That's a good
that
idea.
should be a standard procedure, because I think when people implement this, they will find other interesting
Definitely.
places, but they won't when they think it's still moving.
We usually do state that when we post the update on the mailing list, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think it really should
In
be
the
put
draft
into the
itself.
draft right after the abstract in the note section.
Sure.
So, Carsten,
Chandler?
do you have any? Do you want to implement that as soon as it's ready, or
Yes.
okay?
Jim Shad from the Jabber. I think a minimum of 2 drafts. I think means draft versions are going to be needed before it is considered to be stable.
So update 4 and 5.
I would interpret it that.
Okay, if we
Like
get
that.
comments on version 4 and we feel like we have enough comments, sure,
So version 4 tomorrow and 5
the day after.
the day after.
Okay.
Any additional comments? So maybe Jim, can you explain why we need a version 5?
5.
I think so. So Jim is coming.
Well, based upon how fast things have been going in the past, and the fact that we're basically still doing major architectural changes, I won't be surprised if if version 4 is going to have some fairly major updates in version 5 before things are finished.
Okay,
Okay.
fair enough.
And so version 4, when could we expect to have that version 4? Is that, a month?
Maybe a month, maybe
Okay.
2. I don't know. There is Christmas in between.
You can write it on the plane.
Okay, so December. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Or January.
Okay, perfect. So, next. So I'm going to finish with that slide.
So I guess this is my chance to point out that Jim had tried to ask a question to prompt me about the things I was supposed to be talking about at the start when I was still getting in and a little flustered. So Jim wanted to ask when the reviews are going to happen. The 80 review is going to happen for the 2 drafts that are currently in publication requested, the profiles for GTLS and OSCAR. So I had sort of been putting those on hold a little bit while we were working through the comments on the core framework, which is in very good shape. I think Ludwig and I were syncing up earlier today, and we had like 4 points left that needed a few tweaks. So it's pretty solid, and we're unlikely to need more changes to the framework that will require cascading changes into the profiles. So I should unhold, if you will, the 2 frameworks that are waiting review. And so I'll slot those back into my review queue. I think I've got 2 drafts from SecEvent that I need to look at first. And then the 2 profiles will be after that in my 80 review queue. The week when I get back from here is mostly booked already. I've had people pestering me about resolving their discusses or my discusses on their documents. But I think the week or 2 after that, I should have time to get back to this queue. So 3 weeks from now.
Thank you, Ben, and we appreciate the good review you provide.
Hello, this is Marco Tioca from RISE. This is another working group document and an application profile of ACE to support. Just closer. Yeah. Okay. Marco Tioca from RISE. This is an application profile of ACE. Also working group document to support group OSCAR communication. And it's, of course, an instance of ACE key group count that was presented before. Here, in particular, we describe how a client can join an OSCAR group in an authorized way through the respective group manager, get the key material to participate in group communication secured with group OSCAR, and as a current group member also have further interaction with the group manager to get latest, updated, new key material, and so on, according to this flowchart. There were a few points raised at the previous meeting on this draft, just a quick recap on them. We are still admitting for the time being 3 different alternatives for the joining node to agree with the group manager on the exact algorithms and related parameters used for signing in the group that we believe can definitely coexist. We solved actually the other 3 open points on how to signal the exact encoding for the COSI keys in the group, and how the client can prove the possession of its own private key to the group manager upon joining, essentially through a challenge from the group manager plus its unknowns. And we are also now mandating that the group manager preserves the very same sender IDs of group members in case it fully rekeys the group. Of course, thanks a lot to Ludwig for the review he gave us, actually right during the past meeting that we processed for this update. On top of that, we introduced, also coordinating with SK Group Count, the concept of group name that now has nothing to do with the OSCAR group ID, not to mention with what was previously used zeroed epoch group ID and so on. This is just a plain invariant identifier that is used to get the access token to present to the group manager and then later on to refer to the group. The join resource was just renamed as group membership resource because it's not about joining anymore. For current group members, that's the resource access to have further more interaction with the group manager, but that's just a matter of renaming, and we're providing an example path for that. And then we have a number of profile-specific clarifications on the behavior and the duties of the group manager as responsible for checking compatibility of public keys in the group against the ones provided by the joining node upon joining, and exact actions it has to take upon a new node joining the group or a current member leaving the group. Of course, now this is also aligned with the REST-based paradigm considered in SKGroup.com that Francesca presented. And with reference to that, a couple of details. We are signaling the exact encoding of public keys used in the group, considering values for the CWT confirmation method registry. So we got rid of the old registry we were defining and just reusing an existing one. If there are no objections, we are considering to recommend the size of 8 bytes for the challenge nonce returned by the group manager. That would be aligned essentially with the choice there is now in the OSCORE profile. We got a question from Jit Shad actually for SKGroup.com that we think of specifying in profiles like this one. There are cases where the group manager doesn't actually have the opportunity to return a nonce to the client for producing a signature for proof of possession, like the case where in the DTLS profile, the access token is conveyed during the handshake itself. In that case, a challenge can actually be the TLS exporter out of the DTLS session, and that's essentially what the MQTT profile is also doing. During the join request, same thing. We think of recommending an 8-byte nonce. We clarify that the signature for proof of possession is computing, especially using the very same signing key used by the joining node in the OSCORE group. And in the joining response, when returning public keys of current group members to the joining node, here it comes about identifying the exact associated group members, which is something the profile has to define. And here we're defining that that identifier is the sender ID of that member in the group, which is also included into the public key itself as value of the KID field. According to the same interface, of course, it's possible to ask the latest key material, and we are exemplifying that as happening where, for instance, enough messages have failed to be correctly processed or verified, or the material is expired. And we are also exemplifying the case when a group member can get back to the group manager to ask for new individual key material. And in particular, we say a new sender ID. And that is especially the case when the sender sequence number of a group member wraps around. So in order to be able to restart from 0, it has to change its own sender key material, and that can be practically achieved getting a new sender ID and rederiving its own sender context. Other operation worth noting, it's possible, of course, to leave the group. This is just consistent with the current format of SK group.com. In that case, of course, the group manager frees up the sender ID value of the leaving node, and unless the public key of that node is used in another group, the public key is also removed. When it comes about getting public keys of other members, either get all of them with a get or specifying a subset of group members, the requesting node is interested in having the public keys, again, identifying them with the respective sender IDs. Implementation-wise, we have an ongoing implementation in California from RISE. It's aligned with this draft, although for the time being, we are covering only the joining process, full version based on a post request, and currently supports as associated transport profile used by the client, both the DTLS profile and the OSCORE profile. Speaking of
Ludwig cites, this address isn't correct anymore. I transferred the repository to you yesterday.
will be updated. Thanks. So of course, we'll continue with this, consider especially the full RESTful interface for the group manager. Other implementations I'm aware of, Peter van der Stok in libcoop, and not sure about the exact status, but Jim is also kind of working on this. So as a summary, most of the update is, of course, has been, of course, updating this draft to the latest redesign in SKGroup.com, defining details expected from profiles of SKGroup.com. A few open points we have in mind to address for the next update, which will be, of course, about chasing improvements in SKGroup.com, continuing the implementation and interoping.
I'm just, so if we use the exporter, I mean, what is the size of the exporter, the TLS exporter?
Don't remember by heart.
Because I just expect it to be a little bit longer than 8
Yeah,
bytes.
yeah.
Okay, right. And so these are the questions you're raising, or I mean, is 8 byte fine?
If there
or-
are no objections for anyone,
Yeah.
we plan to go on like this.
Mohit?
Hi, this is Mohit. So I'm coming to ACE after some time. I may need some hand holding here. Isn't there an implicit assumption in the whole design that all the group members use public keys of a certain type? Or is it like, so if one group member uses public keys of certain curve that the other group member doesn't care about, what happens?
It's up to the group member, to the group manager to decide what the type of public keys to use and how they are encoded, and it's up to joining not to comply with that.
So the group member can say that you are not allowed to join the node because you don't have the public key in the same format as the rest of the group members.
Correct.
I don't see this documented anywhere in the draft. I think this is a big assumption that every group member then would use the same curve. So even if some of the group members have moved to a curve that is stronger, if there is one or few that use a weaker curve, the rest of the group would be stuck to that. Maybe it's fine for your use case, but at least it should be documented.
What's documented right now is that the group manager enforces a check against what the joining node tries to provide and what it is expected in the group.
Yeah, but like, curves get updated. So how do you now ensure what crypto agility? Like, I want to move to a new curve, but I'm stuck because all the other group members are not updating.
That was it, by the way.
Yeah, that's yeah. Is that how do you think is that a problem, or how do you plan to address that?
We haven't said like that so
Okay.
far. I think it can be complicated to admit that every group member can do whatever he wants. Everyone should be on the same page with final decision on the group manager that can, in principle, change on the run the type of public keys and their encoding and so on, but everyone has to converge eventually.
Mm-hmm. Because the problem I would see is that if you have devices that are not updated, and then all the, I mean, it's the least, you have the one that is imposing the weak security. That's
So I think it's fine as long as you document it. So just say that the group manager is the one that decides when we move to the stronger crypto curve, for example. So those which haven't been updated won't be able to join the group. But this is something that's still worth at least having in the document.
Agree. Thanks.
Yeah, or I mean, also provide some recommendations about the node when you design a node and you put it so that you avoid this situation. That's
Right. Thank you.
okay. So, any comments? I'm just wondering, do you have how would you go from the exporter to the 8 bytes? Do you have a clear plan for that?
That's
Do you just truncate, or?
That's a possibility. We haven't thought about that yet.
Okay.
That's an instinctive answer to a comment from Jim.
Okay, so does
But
the NIST has a strong recommendation how to do that? Do we have a strong recommendation how to move from some bytes to 8?
It's something that affects the MQTT profile as well, I believe, because they're doing the same thing in one particular proof of possession mode.
Okay.
Jim from the Jabber, the exporter allows you to set the size for exporting, so you can have 8 bytes.
Okay, so there is no problem. I didn't hear, but seems fine. So, next presenter. MQTT.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Shall I start?
You can start. Oh, I mean, I am. Can you command the slides, or do you ask me to do?
I will have to say next slide.
Okay, good.
Good morning, at least for me. So I'll be presenting the MQTT TLS profile of ACE. This is Chidam Shangur from Nominet. Next slide, please. So after the draft was accepted as a workgroup item in Prague in IETF 104, we pushed two major changes based on Jim's and Daniel's very extensive comments. Thank you very much for that. I highlighted the major changes. It's just sampled. There have been various different minor changes as well. In the first version, 01, we've revised the order of how we present the different versions of MQTT and the solutions we provide through ACE. We made the MQTT version 5 the recommended version and explained the interactions for MQTT version 3.1 as a reduced set of interactions for backward compatibility. We also clarified which endpoints are used between the different entities. In version 02, again, based on Jim's comments, we clarified the different methods that the client can use to authenticate and authorize over TLS and MQTT, and moved the auth-set info explanation for token transport from the appendix back to the main text. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that was raised in the reviews was it wasn't clear which endpoints and which protocols were used between different entities. We clarified that between the client and the broker, which is the resource server in our profile, we mandate the use of MQTT over TLS, and the communication is publish subscribe. We also use HTTPS between client and authorization server, and HTTPS between the resource server and the authorization server. But we, of course, accept the possibility of using other protocols between client and authorization server and resource server and authorization server, including CoAP and MQTT, but it was out of the scope. The description was out of the scope. The reason why we went with these choices when we were describing the profile was looking at the MQTT broker implementations in the practice and noticing that they already support HTTPS-based backend communication, like the Mosquito broker. We basically also described the profile with the JSON encoding, but of course it may support CBOR. And we followed, again, the same with the tokens, JSON Web Token or CBOR Web Token with proof of possession. One thing that needs to be clarified is based on the discussion between Hannes, I think that was raised, whether the descriptions for POP for JOT is at the same maturity as in this work group, and whether we have to be making more clarifications or waiting on other solutions from other work groups. Next slide, please. For the client in the second version 02, the major clarification was on how the client authenticates and authorizes to the resource server, and looking at the different options through TLS and MQTT. And this was a table, of course, produced by Jim as well. We basically looked at the 4 options. The case where there is no authentication in either of the layers, this represents the public topics where there is no permission required to publish or subscribe. And also it describes the case where auth-set info, following the security properties of the core draft. In the case, the recommended and described authentication method is in the draft is anonymous over TLS and ACE authentication for the client, where the client provides the token during connecting to the MQTT server broker. We also support the case where token is not provided and this triggers AS discovery. For the case where the authentication is done at the TLS layer, we basically have the same descriptions based on the DTLS authorize draft, where there are RPK or PSK modes supported. In the case of RPK, the token must be provided through the outset info before attempting the connection. And for the PSK, it can be, of course, provided over the PSK identity. When both are used to authenticate the client, we say this should not be done. This is over authenticating the client. And we described it as token in connect would override any permissions during the TLS handshake. Next slide, please. For the outset info, this was described in the appendix as a possible solution if when the authentication is happening over TLS. This follows the similar descriptions in the DTLS profile, where it's the same security properties as well. It's a publish-only topic that the broker supports. Nobody can subscribe to it other than the broker itself. And in the cases where this published message is sent with a quality service level higher than 1, the broker may also return a response code not authorized. However, there's a slight meaning difference here, because in MQTT, the not authorized represents that the published message is not authorized, not that the token is not valid. So there might be something to consider here to clarify in the draft. And the broker stores and indexes all the tokens and then finds the clients during the connection based on this index. Next slide, please. For the case that we describe and recommend in the draft, the authentication during the ACE MQTT handshake, when the client sends the first connect message, we assume that there are 2 ways to do it. The first case where the client passes the token as well as its work on some challenge to the broker, and then using this proof of possession information, the broker validates the client. And the second option is a challenge response handshake, where the client passes only the token to the broker, and then broker challenges the client and expects a response that it can validate the proof of possession. We describe 2 cases because the first one is the only available one to the MQTT version 3.1.1. MQTT version 3.1.1 does not support a challenge response flow, but it can be supported in MQTT version 5. Based on Jim's recommendations, we've considered the challenge to be communicated through the TLS exporter. And things that we decided here, as was also raised by the previous presenter, whether this challenge input should be configurable, what length should be recommended. I was thinking 16 bytes, but maybe it is good to come to a group consensus on what we recommend in terms of challenge sizes. And of course, we will also need group input on whether we describe this correctly and what kind of labels we should be registering for the TLS exporter label. The same length issue also is open for the challenge response flow, which is the second option. Next slide, please. For just completeness sake, I'll describe the case where there is no token, but the method of authentication is ACE. In that case, the broker will return a not authorized connection acknowledgement, and it will use the user property in MQTT defined for the broker to provide additional information to the client, and AS creation hints can be put in here. Again, this is not possible for MQTT version 3.1.1, which doesn't allow additional information to be put into connect. So it will be just a disconnect and not authorized for MQTT version 3.1.1. Next slide, please. So at the moment, we basically revised extensively the draft based on the chair's comments, and we basically think that there should be some clarifications needed in the way that length of the challenges and the TLS exporter labels, and whether we've explained the different encodings correctly and how the proof of possession is done. I think that needs to be still shaped up a bit more. And Implementation-wise, there is a prototype implementation for MQTT version 3.1.1, but we've started a collaboration with Edinburgh University, which is looking at implementing the MQTT version 5 version, and I think Jim is also working on an implementation. A question to the group, whether the draft should stay concise like this, or should it also include the payload encryption for the published message based on the GroupCom draft. So those are all I would like to present today to you.
Thank you. Are there any recommendation from the room? Francesca is coming.
Hi, Francesca. Just first a note about the fact that the encryption is not exactly in the ASCII GroupCom, it's in the PubSub profile, that is individual document right now. Yeah, you wouldn't even need to use the ASCII GroupCom for that. And I do think, yes, I think that would be good to have, to describe that for MQTT as well. So,
okay.
Yeah, I support that.
Which means we have to wait for the PubSub to be published.
If we do it, if SIGDEM defines that for MQTT referencing the PubSub profile, then yes, that would be, you would need to get the PubSub done. Jim from the Jabber says, I think that it can be done in a separate draft without any issues. Yeah, and talking about that just from me now, yes, it can be done in a separate draft. It is already in the PubSub. It could split out of the PubSub, and we did discuss that before in this working group, and the recommendation was, let's not take it out. So yeah, we're going back and forth with that, but yeah.
Hi, Marco Tiloca. I have a comment on slide 6. I guess it was. Right. On the right side, that proof of possession mode. So you return a challenge generated by the broker and you sign or mark that challenge alone. Yeah, you may consider what we are doing in the profile I presented before, where something similar happens, but what the client signs is actually that challenge concatenated with a nonce it generates of its own too.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I've considered a similar option as well. I think I'll take a look at it.
Just because it's better to avoid pushing someone to sign something not including something generated by itself too.
I understand. So in that case, probably it will add to whatever is passed through the TLS exporter, maybe, because it's something that both the client and the broker knows. But yeah.
That's the way.
Or it is just client generated. You mean it's just client generated? Okay, good.
The thing is that then you have to include that nonce generated by the client also in the second response you send to the broker.
Okay, I think that's possible in the auth data in MQTT. I'll take a look.
Hi, this is Mohit. Can we go back to the last slide? So again, pardon me for my lack of knowledge, but what's the use case for encrypting the publish message? Would it still be discoverable after decryption, or what's the use case?
So the publish message, this is basically addressing the comment where the broker sees everything that is published as a payload to a topic. In that case, only the payload will be encrypted and the published topics will be visible, and only the clients that are authorized to read what the message is about can read it, but they can still discover the topic itself. So it won't affect the topic discovery. It won't affect the fact that broker knows it received messages to that topic, but it will affect the broker's ability to read those messages.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
So, and you had a question in one of your slides which concerned the length of
I think it's similar to the previous presenter, where I was curious whether, as a group, we're recommending a length for challenges, and I would like to make sure that this draft is basically agrees to whatever is agreed in general in the group.
Yeah. So, has the group any feedback to provide? Would be helpful. Ben is coming to the mic.
Ben Kadek, we had a little bit of discussion in the Jabber room, and it's seeming likely that 8 bytes is going to be the right trade-off here.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
So Mohit, what's the reason for picking 8 bytes? Is it saving some message processing? Because generally the trend is to 16 and above. So I'm trying to understand why we are settling with 8.
And I had the same question.
Yeah, so the idea is that this is a very time-limited challenge, and so you get sort of you're getting like the channel binding sort of property. The attacker would need to guess the exact value, so you need uniqueness as opposed to collision resistance. So you don't need the birthday attack or the birthday paradox attack strength reduction. And because we're in a constrained environment, you want to save the bytes basically. So I mean, we already have precedent for using like the 8-byte authentication tag for CCM, and like I'm not super happy about it because I'm used to the big iron cases where we can just use the big nonces and not have to worry about it. But given all the precedent, I think the trade-off is likely to end up at 8 bytes.
So I think that you should have a security consideration at least on the size, and explain because I don't see why what we're defining in this working group cannot be used outside of the constraint devices. So I think that's what's being commenting in the security considerations.
Another question I had was whether this should be described as length as of the challenge configurable with a minimum size recommendation of 8 bytes.
It sounds better.
Would you want it configurable like on a per broker basis or a per group or per like deployment?
I was thinking more per broker basis. I was considering that as a per broker basis suggestion when it is. You mean per broker deployment, where the broker would basically tell what input challenge sizes it expects?
That's what I had in mind when saying it, but you know, the main point is to be clear about what scope. That is perhaps a little more flexibility than it's clear we need, but it's also not clearly wrong. Okay. So we can talk about it more.
All right.
Well, think about it, I guess.
Mohit, can't think of any immediate attacks, but I think there's no reason to do this flexibility. If you're happy with 8, just stick with 8. Don't see any reason to go than 8, 16, 32, or as I said, can't think of something immediately, but may cause us trouble later on.
Okay. I prefer to keep it simple. I just want to make sure that it's future-proof, basically, and it fits to the protocols that is included in the draft.
Okay, so because I'm hearing different things, so I understand that having an 8 byte is not a problem here. Is there anyone understanding something different? So we can keep it that way. That's my understanding. Yeah, I don't know if you see the room, but I don't hear anyone saying otherwise. So I guess you can go with 8 bytes.
Perfect.
Okay. Do you think you can provide an update, let's say in December?
I should be able to, yes, no problem.
Okay, so my expectation is that this draft needs maximum 2 more versions before the working group last call.
Mhm.
So one in December and another one in January, because everyone is going to review the draft in January.
Sure.
So, okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And so now, it's me. I try to keep my computer open, but it's always in sleep mode anytime I want to look at the agenda. So yeah, so you're going to do this one. This?
So yes, first document that is not a working group document of this session. The PubSub profile for A's. I just wanted to add the slide about motivation and a quick recap. So this document defines how to use A's to authorize nodes and provision keys for core PubSub. It also defines how to protect core PubSub communication using those keys. And this second part can definitely be applied to MQTT as well. So it was submitted the first time at IETF 98, so it has seen quite a few review updates. It also got several reviews, it got positive feedback, it got support during previous meetings, and has been updated according to the updates on ASCII Group.com. Ludwig, could you make sure you check the Jabber, just in case? Thank you. Okay, thanks. So there is some related work to this document. The core co-op PubSub, that is an adopted working group document, and I hope it's gonna be done soon. And then the MQTT PubSub, that is an ACE adopted working group document. So I only have this slide. The status is the document is updated to version 6, complies with ASCII Group.com. There is a planned update of version 7, which is keep the update to comply with ASCII Group.com. We would like to, or I would like to clarify and expand on the fact that the protection of content applies to MQTT PubSub as well as co-op PubSub. Right now, it's not. It's possible, but maybe it's not clear enough in the document. So I would like to clarify that, and possibly improve on encryption and content protection. Also, if possible, to get reviews from the MQTT authors to make sure that they satisfies what they had in mind. And before I do so, I would like to get adoption from this working group so that we can move forward.
So, Mohit, yet again, can we go back to the previous slide? So I understand that co-op PubSub and MQTT PubSub are different, or there is some details that are different, but architecturally there is a publisher, there is a broker, and there are subscribers. So is like I'm trying to understand the
Okay.
the difference between how the keys are used for MQTT
So
and co-op.
let me
PubSub.
just say something that, yeah, I tried to express in previous meetings, but it's good to recap here as well. This draft is basically two parts. The first part is a profile of co-op PubSub, as MQTT has a profile for MQTT. And the second part is how to use those keys to protect the content of the publication. And that part is applicable to both MQTT and PubSub because they're all PubSub. So you can use that. And we did have discussion before we go back to, should we split it? Should we not split it? Should we keep it together? Should we adopt one, two, both? I don't know. So we had this discussion before, and the result was, yes, we want this, or I'm recapping what you can find in previous meetings. Good feedback. Yes, we support this. No, do not split it because this is simple enough to have in one document.
So I would be supportive of adopting this document. I still had one question about the first part. So you said it's a profile of co-op PubSub.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It's a profile of ACE for co-op PubSub. So it's to.
So is it a lightweight profile, or is it defining how to do security for co-op PubSub and the original co-op PubSub has no security there, or?
Is how to do ACE to get keys to PubSub clients, so publisher and subscribers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carsten Bormann, in the same vein, when another PubSub comes up, I want to do this for AMQP. What do I have to do?
The second part would apply of this document because that is general PubSub. It's, I mean, if there is a content, there is a broker, a publisher, subscriber, you have keys, you can use that.
Can I use it right away, or do I need this glue that is in the first part?
Can you use it right away, or?
Do I need the glue that is in the first part?
No, you can use that right away.
Okay.
You mean with MQTT?
Yeah, like any PubSub.
Yeah, so the underlying question, of course, is there are forms of PubSub that don't have a broker. And
well, then I guess it would depend on what is the structure of the PubSub. But this is about encryption of content.
yes,
So generally, yes, you can use that.
Yes, that's what I'm aiming at. The value part here really is the content encryption. So if I'm using 0MQ with norm, which is a reasonable way to do PubSub, this is really just multicast groups and some people send to the multicast group and some other people are receiving from the multicast group. Can I go ahead and use this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sigdem from the Jabber. The name of that draft is co-op PubSub something something. Will that change if it also describes stuff applicable to MQTT? She was under the impression that this, or rather the stuff applicable to MQTT, like the payload encryption, would be described in the MQTT TLS profile.
So I'm not sure I got all of that, but the first part was about the name of the draft.
Which at the moment is co-op PubSub.
Yes, because that was born as a profile of co-op PubSub.
Yes. So when it starts now to describe things applicable to
we can
other...
change. I didn't think it was necessary because it's just being updated. I was hoping we would get it adopted. So at that point, we can also consider changing the draft name. And then the second part was.
Yes, she was under the impression that this description of payload encryption would go into the MQTT draft?
So, I mean, we discussed it before in a previous meeting, me and her, right? That this is applicable to both. Like this can be reused in MQTT. I just put it there because I thought that was the simplest thing to do, to have it in the same draft. But before, like, I mean, this is not even adopted working group document. I would like to get it there before we think about how to reshuffle things around.
Okay. Switching to the Gymshark head,
Okay.
I would like to see a single content encryption format for both versions and not a different one for each.
Yeah, that's the idea. I think it's right now the draft is written as it only applies to Coop PubSub, and I plan on clarifying that's not the case, but it's already not the case.
Sorry. And another hat switched back to Signum. She would be fine with that, having one format.
Yes, yeah.
Just make sure that it's somewhere where the MQTT implementers will find it.
Yes, definitely.
It's on the web, so that's not a problem.
Carsten.
Yeah, Casper, so the question, what do we put where and when and so on, mostly is a question of timelines and who gets normative references to what and so on. So I think that should be solvable. The question really that is not entirely clear to me, and maybe that also was behind Jim's question, was is the interface between the second part and the first part sufficiently well understood, excuse me, is the interface between the second and the first part sufficiently well understood that I would be able to just go ahead and do my 0MQ profile next week?
I think so. If you don't think so, please let me know,
But maybe
because that means we can improve.
Maybe we simply have to test that.
Yes, yes. But
Okay, that
yeah.
may be the way to.
That's my
decide
goal
this.
anyway, so. So I would again ask the chairs for.
So, has anyone who read the draft? So I think Francesca as well.
Yeah.
And I think also.
Also, several people who are not present. I know for a fact that
Enrico,
Jim has read the draft, that Peter has read the draft.
Sigdem also. Okay, so I think we have who would be against a call for adoption? Against, yeah. I guess the draft being adopted.
Against adoption.
No, I mean, I'm asking if anyone has anything against this document being adopted before I start the call.
So basically, if you have something against this document being adopted, go to the mic and explain. So I guess otherwise, mailing list anyway. So.
Okay, so my guess is, well, I think there is no need to ham, because I don't see any purpose of having a ham here. We're gonna send that to the mailing list. And so, well, what I'd like is that a few more people read the draft. And who would like to commit to review the draft once adopted? Okay.
Yes. We got 4.
Okay.
So Klaus,
So-
Marco, Carsten, Mohit,
I think that's one point is that
and hopefully Sigdem.
yeah.
I don't know if she volunteers. I'm volunteering her.
So we will
Yes, thank you.
okay, so we will move for the adoption on the mailing list.
Thank you. And yeah, for now, I keep it as one document. And I hope when we have synchronized with MQTT authors and move forward with adoption, we can rediscuss if the structure of having these 2 parts in the same document is fine or not. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I mean, probably this week or next week, I'm gonna start the call for adoption, and we'll see where it is. OSCORE profile. Yes.
Marco Tilonka, this is another profile of ACE, but a transport profile of ACE in the original sense, like the OSCORE profile or DTLS profile. And this is about enabling a client and a resource server to communicate using OSCORE or group OSCORE, especially. At the previous meeting, we were asked especially to clarify the applicability and the need for this, and to fix a possible vulnerability for impersonation attacks. So why do we need this? You have group OSCORE for secure group communication among group members. Point is, how do you enforce access control of a given group member to access the resources at another group member in a group? And you don't need to do big things in some simple use cases where essentially being authorized to access a group and getting the group key material is essentially fine to be authorized to do anything at any resource at any group member, and you're just fine. It's not fine in other use cases where you need something more complex and you need to individually authorize each client to do particular things at other group members. Essentially, you want to distinguish different clients per different access rights they're supposed to have. Practical examples that we improved in the introduction of the draft. First example thing of a set, a group of logs, and you want some class of clients to be able to check the status of logs only, while other clients can be able to check the status and also change it. So think of different kinds of users like children or parents, or especially you want the logs to actually act as servers only, so not to be able to open other logs in the first place. A more complicated use case related to building automation was provided by Dave Robin from BACnet. There are BACnet applications where you may have a class of clients like light switch that are supposed to perform only low priority commands, while fire panels can perform essentially any kinds of admitted commands, plus set the system at the status where only high-level authorized clients can perform high-level operations. So essentially, you want to enforce the different categories of client to do only the things they're supposed to do. So you need fine-grained access control that you can, in fact, achieve using ACE. And that being said, then you have a problem because current profiles of ACE don't enable a client and resource server to use secure group communication. Even if you consider the OSCORE profile, you go for it. A client posts an access token to a resource server, they establish an OSCORE context, they can use OSCORE, but at the same time, they cannot legitimately use group OSCORE as an alternative, or at the same time, they have to stick to the single protocol indicated by the profile OSCORE. So bottom line, you cannot have together group OSCORE for secure communication and fine-grained access control enforced with ACE. And this profile is exactly about filling this gap. It builds over the OSCORE profile latest version and essentially admits 2 communication protocols in the same profile, OSCORE and group OSCORE, assuming both parties are already in the correct OSCORE groups. So like in the OSCORE profile, first of all, they establish a pairwise OSCORE context, of course. And then the idea is to first bind the access token not only to the pairwise context, but also to the group context. And second, to bind the pairwise context also to the group context. So you achieve the same properties you have from the OSCORE profile, plus essentially proof of group membership of the client, thanks to the binding between the token and also the group context. How is this achieved? It's about slightly extending the messages of the OSCORE profile essentially, and the derivation of the pairwise context. So in the access token request, the client provides to the AES also the sender ID it uses in the OSCORE group, the group identifier, and its own public key, together with the signature computed on something at the bottom of the slide, using its own signing key, essentially to prove the AES possession of its own private key. What to sign? Well, what we are proposing is using something related to that secure association between client and authorization server. For instance, if they are communicating using DTLS, they can sign an exporter. If they are communicating using OSCORE, they can essentially provide an output from HKDF extract involving information related to the pairwise OSCORE context between the two. Later on, the AES produces, well, an access token response back to the client that includes, again, those same parameters provided before by the client. And those parameters, together with the public key of the client, are also echoed into the access token that can be then later on delivered to the resource server. This is essentially the outcome of input and discussion with Jim in order to avoid a naughty group member, another group member in the same group of this client, to essentially impersonate this client using the wrong sender ID. At least this way you are providing the resource server with an opportunity to check that the public key in the token actually matches with the sender ID that comes in the token in the salt parameter. Then you essentially derive a pairwise OSCORE context between client and resource server, just like in the OSCORE profile, considering just a few more pieces of information when composing the parameters that are used for deriving the pairwise context. So essentially, the context ID is composed not only of the two nonces exchanged between the client and the resource server, but also of the group ID of the OSCORE group that was indicated in the access token. The salt is composed also of the sender ID of the client in the OSCORE group, and if not empty, the master salt of the OSCORE group. The master secret is composed considering not only the master secret indicating with the token, but also the master secret of the group. And then the context is just derived according to the derivation procedure of OSCORE. As an example that, of course, hides a lot of the low-level details, here we have a client, two resource servers, assuming all of them already in the OSCORE group. The client asks for an access token, so indicating also its own sender ID in the OSCORE group and the group ID of the group. And then the information is echoed back also in the access token. Then the client posts to resource server 1, exchange of nonces, derivation of the pairwise OSCORE context, as described below. Well, the client repeats the very same procedure to post an access token to RS2. And of course, the scopes here can be different in the two requested access token. They also derive a pairwise context. And at this point, well, we are admitting by construction in this profile that it's fine for the client to communicate with the resource servers, either with OSCORE or with group OSCORE. And in this example, there's a first OSCORE request to RS1, followed then by a multicast request targeting the whole group, so both RS1 and RS2. That, of course, is protected with the group OSCORE context. So you can enforce fine-grained access control with specific groups, with specific scopes, as agreed with the tokens. So it's a new proposed transport profile of ACE, essentially for having fine-grained access control as expected in ACE, plus client and resource servers that can use not only OSCORE as only possibility right now with the profiles available, but also group OSCORE. It's supported by at least one real-world use case coming from BACnet. And we are essentially pairing the group and the pairwise context, as well as the token with also the group context. This is an update that replies to previous questions, comments we got the last meeting. Now we'd appreciate reviews to this document.
This is Ben Kaduk. So I have to apologize. I was just looking at this stuff for the first time like today, and I'm generally in favor of fine-grained access control and whatnot and all this good stuff. I'm just trying to understand basically why we need both this and the stuff we already have. And is it maybe that there are some devices or situations that can do the sort of base group communications with OSCAR, but they can't do this, or just it takes longer to develop?
Group OSCAR as such doesn't cover access control. It's just about protecting messages so that can be processed by a group of devices.
Right, but you like the work that you just presented is overkill for situations that could use that, but would it still meet all of the use cases that could work for?
Right, they're listed in introduction, and one of them is actually coming from BACnet, where they can imagine a problem like this with different classes of clients that you need to do or not do different things. So you want to enforce this level of granularity for access control. So you need something like ACE.
Right, I guess my question would be more like, if we did this document and like threw away the other one, who would be sad?
Which is the other one?
The OSCAR group communication that does not have fine granularity.
Oh, that doesn't cover this. That's about authenticating the client to communicate with the group manager, just forgetting the key material to get into the group. This is exactly about what happens after that.
I see. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry for my confusion.
Thank you. So there's no overlapping at all. This is just a continuation of our timeline, so to say.
So I'm just going to ask how many people have read the draft. But are you co-author, Francesca? Yeah, okay. Jim, okay. So my guess is that it's a little bit too soon for the adoption, but has anyone any comment, or anyone has any, well, obviously, are there any reasons you didn't read the draft, or?
It's long, I have to admit.
Okay. Is there anyone that's going to read the draft? I hope people on Meeteco, all the people on Meeteco are going to read the draft. Yeah, I think it's, for now, it's a little bit too soon. That's my opinion. But the thing is, the problem I have is what to expect for the next time. That's my... Okay. Okay, so I think for today it's a little bit too early to have plans for the adoption or not adopting the draft. But I would like that Marco can at least have a clear plans on what he has to do for the next step. So
just for the record, from the Jabber, there are 2 reviews.
Okay, 2 reviews. So, and are they happy with the draft, or?
No, they will be coming. They will read the draft, they
Oh,
said.
they will.
Yeah.
They commit. Okay, good. So
I think that Ben is a point we should clarify better. At what point of the lifetime this comes in?
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you know what to do. Please update the draft pretty soon so that the people that commit to review don't forget they have committed. And Francesca got the names of the people that committed. So yeah, so I think next step is to maybe update a little bit the draft, but I mean, don't overkill. And then, I mean, more people need to review before we can proceed to the adoption. I think that's the, if anyone find the draft, I mean, useless, I mean, they have to stay it as soon as possible. Okay, so when are we expected to finish? Now. So can you say a few words briefly about the two remaining drafts?
Yes, I was the next presenter, then it was about Ludwig.
Okay, but okay, so you can do. This one?
Yes.
So be very, very fast.
Yes, just a few words. This is another RESTful interface for the OSCORE group manager. This is not intended for candidate group members or current group members like the profile we presented before. This is intended for an administrator that as a first thing wants to create OSCORE groups, set, update their configurations and parameters, and possibly delete OSCORE groups. It essentially describes resources of the group manager for doing that and operations on them for an administrator acting as client that of course has to get an access token to be authorized to do that at the group manager first of all. The idea is very much inspired to the latest intended redesign of the APS for a co-op pub sub-broker. In fact, as you can see in this picture, on the group manager, we propose to have a single group collection resource and then one group configuration resource for each created active OSCORE groups. So essentially on the group collection resource, you can send a GET to retrieve the list of active groups, or you can send the POST to create a group specifying the name and its configuration parameters. And we are defining how to default to not specified parameters. And the response back will include as a confirmation the name of the group and the parameters enforced by the group manager in the configuration. Then it's possible, of course, to retrieve the current configuration or update it or to delete the group, just acting on the resource specific for that group. So interface on the group manager for the application, RESTful for the administrator, RESTful, create, configure, delete OSCORE groups. As far as I know, Peter van der Stok has an implementation already in LibCoop. We plan to start one in Californium. Under recommendation from Jim, we started this as an experimental document. So I wonder if this is appropriate or can instead be a standard track document. We ask for reviews.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So very quickly, the other draft, basically it's about being able to get notified when a token affecting you gets revoked. So the idea is when token is revoked, the client or the resource server that is affected by that token wants to know about that. And why are we not revoking tokens at the moment? There is a draft, the RFC in OAuth, but it's about the client revoking its own tokens when it doesn't need them anymore. But in IoT space, we think there are use cases where the AS or the resource owner would want to revoke tokens, and then how do the client and the resource server learn that? And the idea is when you register a client or a resource server at the authorization server, you create a resource, And this resource is gettable or get observable in co-op by the client or the resource. And on this resource, the AS publishes which tokens are revoked and not yet expired. That's the short version.
Do we need a longer version?
Eventually.
Yeah.
Travis Spencer, Security. Question, Ludwig, is it bound to IoT devices, or can this notification also be used on the big bad internet?
Well, currently it's defined for co-op, so
Okay, thanks.
yes, you can use it, but and it would be easy enough to define something similar for HTTP, but currently the draft doesn't.
Okay, thank you, Ludwig. Thank you all for coming. And I think the meeting is adjourned. So read the drafts.